Okay, key stage 4, inheritance and selection. The key words, there's a fair few on this one, so make sure you're listening and concentrating all the way through. A version of a gene, right? So what you do is you get a gene from mum, gene from dad, right? Say for eye color, hair color, they are alleles. Small molecules which proteins are assembled. Okay, so proteins is a big long chain of amino acids. A form of reproduction involving a single parent, so there's only one parent. Genetically identical offspring is asexual reproduction. The universal system of naming organisms, including their genus and species. So for example, we are Homo sapiens. Okay, that is the binomial system. The scientist who developed the theory of evolution by natural selection, Charles Darwin. A long coiled molecule of DNA that carries genetic information in the form of genes. Mostly in your cells it's kind of like a long strand until it starts to divide, and often they are drawn as then your X's. Chromosomes. The organization of organisms into groups based on their characteristics and structure. Classification. So for example, Homo sapiens, that is us. Right, but then if you go up another level before that, then it's very similar to chimpanzees. The simplest method of cloning plants, a branch is cut from a parent plant and replanted in compost. So break a branch off, cut a branch off, and then put it into the ground, and theoretically you can make cuttings where you can grow a new tree. A cellular membrane disorder resulting from the presence of a recessive allele, cystic fibrosis. And the important thing about that is it is recessive. A double-strand polymer wound to form a double helix carries the genetic code. So it's a bit like a spring, and then it's got like another spring. I can't draw it. That's DNA. Describes an allele that is always expressed represented by a capital letter, right? So if you've got PP, big P is the dominant allele. A procedure used to determine the presence of faulty genes in an embryo produced in IVF, right? So when you've had IVF, you've got an egg and a sperm. Let's say you have 8 different eggs and sperms. Then what you can do is you can embryo screen to look at the DNA that's within them. A few embryonic cells are removed and screened for defective alleles. The gradual change in inherited traits within a population over time occurs due to natural selection, survival of the fittest. Is evolution. The death of all members of a species, dodo. Extinction. The fusion of a nucleus of a male and female gamete, so you got the egg, you got the sperm, fertilization. The remains of dead organisms found in rocks which are millions of years old, fossils. Sex cells, so sperm and egg cells with half the usual number of chromosomes. The posh name for that is then gametes. A section of DNA that codes for a specific sequence of amino acids which undergo polymerization to form a protein. Sounds very complicated, but what you got is there's your chromosome. That little point there might be a gene. The modification of the genome of an organism by insertion of a desired gene from another organism, enabling the formation of organisms with beneficial characteristics. Okay, so where you might insert into wheat a gene that gives it resistance to certain microbes. Genetic engineering. The complete genetic material of an organism is the genome. An organism's genetic composition describes all alleles. Okay, so genetic composition is its genotype, so gene type, types of genes. Crops that have their genomes modified by the insertion of a desired gene from another organism. GM crops, like I said before, you could have wheat that grows taller, gets a gene from another plant that makes it grow taller or produce more wheat. When someone has 2 different alleles of a gene, capital F, little f, heterozygous, hetero. When someone has 2 identical of the gene, big little f, or it could be big F, homozygous, means 1. The classification of organisms into kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species by Carl Linnaeus is the Linnaeus system. A form of cell division that produces gametes. So what you do is you start off with one parent and you end up with 4, where you've got half the number of chromosomes in each one of those daughter cells. Meiosis. A form of cell division that produces 2 identical daughter cells from one parent. So this time you start with one parent and you get 2 identical. So that there is identical to that and to that. And that's more for growth and repair, where meiosis is producing sperms and eggs. A type of bacteria that is resistant to antibiotic methicillin. So was it methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus? You don't need to know that, okay, but basically it's resistant to all the antibiotics that we have. A random change in DNA, which may result in genetic variants, is a mutation. The process by which the frequency advantageous traits are passed on in genes gradually increase the population over time. Okay, so lions, the biggest lion wins, right? And then the biggest lion's genes then get carried on to the next generation. Natural selection. It's kind of like survival of the fittest, like I talked about before. An organism's observable characteristics, what they physically look like, due to the interactions of the genes and the environment, that is their phenotype, their physical type. A condition where an individual is born with extra fingers or toes due to the presence of the dominant allele, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a thumb. Polydactyly. Okay, but the key on that one is it is a dominant, right, which means it gets expressed if it's there. A grid used to predict the potential outcomes of genetic cross. Okay, so what you have is you have a grid that looks like that. So it could be A, and then what you do is you then fill it in. That's a Punnett square. Describes an allele that is only expressed in the absence of a dominant. So if you've got F, the dominant one is then just shown, but if you've got F, these are little f's, I should have drawn littler, they are recessive. The process by which humans artificially select organisms with desirable characteristics and breed them to produce offspring with desirable phenotypes. So for example, the pug, right? Pugs have got wrinklier, fatter and flatter faces. Selective breeding. A pair of chromosomes responsible for the determination of gender. XY is males, XX is females. They are the sex chromosomes. A form of reproduction involving the fusion of male and female gametes, sexual reproduction, and the good thing about that is it produces genetic variation because you've got different sperms and different eggs. A group of similar organisms that are able to breed with one another to produce fertile offspring. Okay, so horses can breed with horses, right? But then horse can't breed with, another animal like a lion. Okay, so they've got to be within the same species to be able to reproduce. A method of classification which organisms are categorized into 3 groups: archaea, bacteria, and eukaryota. That was by Carl Woese, 3-domain system. The difference between individuals due to genes, the environment, or a combination of both is variation. A carrier used to transfer a gene from one organism to another organism, okay, in so like in your genetically modified crops, is a vector. Now there's a huge amount of keywords in there then, okay, but what you got to do is I would possibly even play that video back again. Play the video back again and have a good think about what's going on. Then after you've done this, pause the video, write down your answers into an exercise book. Okay, very impressed if you got all those right. What's about 41 or something like that? That's a lot of words. Okay, but you need to do it again even if you got 41. Okay, because what you've got to do is you've got to make sure these words are stuck in your head. Okay, well done. Okay, if you got them all right, that's brilliant. If you didn't get them all right, it might be worth just doing it again just to get them in your head. Right, but don't forget, do it again in the near future.